Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the AV Savants, or not the AV Savants, the AV Experience. God, I'm that tired, and I have to get up at 3:30 in the morning. It's like I'm mixing everything together. Uh, I don't even know what episode it is. It's probably episode 6, maybe episode 7. I have no idea because I always get it wrong. So I'm not. We're gonna restart. And we're gonna say this is episode 7. Uh, this episode is how much do you need to spend? What is enough? How much is too much? Is there too much? Is there too little? I have no idea, but I think it's a good topic for us to talk about. We may talk about what speakers, where you should land price-wise to really get everything out of your space, subwoofers, projectors. We'll see how far down the rabbit hole we fall. Jonathan has just informed me that he's going camping next week, and I really hope the trailer doesn't light on fire as you drive to this camping site. After your last one and what happened, I'm a little nervous about this camping adventure that you're going on. I expect details. There needs to be some tea when you get back.
This one will probably be safer. It's just here in Missouri, down at Johnson Shut-ins, which is a fantastic, like, water swimming hole type state park. Like, a lot of swimming is on the agenda. It's not very far away. It's about 4.5 hours away.
I noticed that you said should be better.
Well,
Like you're not 100% confident that that is going to transpire.
not driving in the mountains and not driving on the Nebraska roads are two big boons right out of the gate. It is the Missouri mountains, but they're like 1,700 feet tall, which is, compared to 14,000 feet in the
But a hill
Rockies and whatnot.
to you in a trailer may be insurmountable.
With the brakes locked on, you cannot go.
Maybe. I hope this goes a little bit better than it did last time.
I hope so.
At least the driving experience. I think you had a lot of fun on the actual trip itself. I just hope the driving experience is a little bit less adventurous.
Yeah.
And maybe boring, perhaps to say.
This should be kind of neat in another aspect. I haven't taken a family trip with my folks for a long time, but we have an 8-person vehicle, and we invited them to come. So we're picking them up on the way. We'll all crowd into the bus, and then stay in the trailer for a few days down there.
That's either going to be really good or miserable with your parents.
I'm going for really good.
There is no in between. It's either one or the other. There's no middle.
If there was the stress of last time with my folks, that wouldn't have been great.
How would that have gone? What would have happened? How would they have dealt with it?
They probably would have been fine. I was the one that was getting stressed out because I was driving. But my dad's a social worker by trade, so he has patience of Job type person, and my mom's a school teacher, so she also has a lot of patience. They probably would have just laughed at me, not in a bad, not a bad way, but just
maybe have made your situation worse.
They could have diffused it. They might have diffused it, or it could have gone. It could have gone the other way.
Does your wife help diffuse those situations? Or is she just pouring gasoline onto the fire?
I'm gonna not answer that one. I'm not sure how to answer that one without getting in the doghouse.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I'm off to Cedia this weekend. I leave tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. for lots of building, lots of sweating, lots of wondering why I went this early. But in the end, when you're flying home, you realize that it was all worth it. Somebody in chat asks, will you have an outdoor theater? Are you that dedicated?
I've thought about this, and I have that portable projector, and I have a little portable 300-watt power supply, and we have electricity there because we're at a trailer site. So absolutely, I can. Now, whether my wife would, if that would diffuse anything, is the next question. My wife.
That's might like THX button, and you bringing the theater with you on a camping trip. I'm not sure how that would go.
But I very well might, because that little portable projector I have could be fun. We could watch like some documentary or something. That would be fun.
Blair Witch Project or some terrifying in the woods.
No, not with my 4 kids. Unless I want them all in my bed that night.
Cocaine Bear.
The other thing about that is if you're camping and somebody's doing that, are you disturbing the peace in the campsite?
Probably.
So you'd have to keep the volume low, but it wouldn't be extravagant.
I don't even think it's worth it. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's just another thing that could possibly go wrong.
Yeah.
What I'll expect if you take that stuff with you is a story about how your portable projector started a forest fire.
Oh my gosh.
And you're responsible for the next like big one that's on the news. And I hear some schmuck started a forest fire because his portable projector was sending light out behind the actual lens, like the Optima. Lit a leaf on fire, and that's where it sparked. Don't do it. It's not worth it.
Projectors are not allowed at Missouri State Parks the rest of eternity because of this one outgoing.
We can point at that on the sign and be like, Jonathan was here.
Yeah.
So let's get into our topic. How much do you need to spend on a home theater? What is enough? I think subjectively, this is a very person-to-person question, because when you say things like that's expensive or that's cheap, both of those are subjective to the person that is answering. So what do you think is the bare minimum speaker-wise for a home theater? But then let's also talk about, because I think home theater may be a little bit easier speaker-wise than 2-channel. What do you think is a speaker that can do both and do it well?
Can I tackle this from a slightly different angle?
Sure.
I mean, Ryan and I haven't talked about this before tonight. Like this, we've talked about this topic in the past, but not before this podcast. I think that there's probably like tiers to which you attain and you don't want to go back. But I think those tiers of experience, you could even say, can start pretty basic, right? Because I don't know where you started, but I started with a home theater in box.
Yeah, that's where I started.
AIWA was the brand name. Before that, I had like a subwoofer from a pawn shop and a couple Sony bookshelves.
Mine was a Sony with had like cool aluminum circular buttons that did not feel very good when you pressed them, and it had one of those like suck-in DVD drives that was just a matter of time before something got sucked in and then broke. So that was my start, with the little speakers that were about that big in the sub that was a little bit bigger, but man, you thought you were the...
Yeah, I mean, that was a lot of fun. And even to the point where one of my, I was a young man when I had that AIWA. I don't even know how to say it. Is it Iowa? I'm not sure how to say it.
No idea.
At any rate, I was a young man when I had that system, and one of my adult friends liked that system so much he wanted me to give it to him when I upgraded. Like he was like, I want that system. That's awesome. He wanted to buy it from me, not give it to me. Like he wanted to buy it from me. So like I say that to introduce the topic in the sense that I think you can start really low and be excited, right? There's excitement to be had. And then once you achieve those levels and once you kind of like work your way up the tiers, I wouldn't want to go back to one of those systems today, right? Like you have the experience and the knowledge and know what you think good is, and you probably wouldn't be willing to go back to that type of system, but there's still tiers. So I'm not going to say anyone won't enjoy getting started with whatever they can swing, whether it come from a pawn shop or whatever else, that's great, fine. With all that to say, with the time that I've spent in this hobby, I would probably say now I'm looking at like a $200 or $300 pro audio speaker as kind of a minimum entry point, as what I think is something I would steer someone to and nothing less. And I'm talking new, like you go to Musicians and Friends, Guitar Hero, something like that. You buy I'm not even going to call it entry level, like but a kind of a small venue pro audio speaker, has 8-inch drivers, a compression driver. It's going to be able to hit reference. It's going to be $200 or $300. Not going to be pretty. It's going to be a plastic case, but it's going to hit reference and it's going to sound good. It's going to sound great for live music. It's going to sound great for home theater. It's going to sound fun, like lively and fun. So to me, that's where the dust has settled in my line of thinking. And for subwoofers, if we want to talk about that now, I can lay that out there. If not, we'll talk about that later.
We'll get to those in a minute.
Okay. Where do you fall out?
Oh man, where do I fall in? I guess it depends on which way that I go. I like you think that there's tiers, and once you reach a certain tier, there is no going back. But I'm trying to remove the tiers from everything. Like taking away, what would I, if I was just getting into this space, be happy with starting out? And I think I have to agree with you that something like pro audio is probably better than doing something for $200, $300, $400 a speaker than spending $200, $300, $400 speakers on a bookshelf. I just don't think you're going to get what you're going to get out of the pro audio stuff you're losing the dynamic range. You may, in the pro audio stuff, lose a little bit of that, I don't know how else to call this, but emotional connection.
Refinement, if you will.
Refinement, yeah, maybe that. But I guess it depends on what you're trying to get at, because how I've come to realize things is that there's a very big difference between what you can get away with in the home theater realm for speakers and what you can get away with in the 2-channel. So if you don't care about 2-channel, I think pro audio speakers all day, every day. I mean, you could probably get away with doing spatial in that, but if you're doing 2-channel, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that.
Where do you land? Are you like $1,000, $2,000? I mean, you get into audiophile 2-channel, you're starting to spend some money.
No, I don't think you need to go that high. What jumps out to me is something like a Martin Logan B100. Right? You heard the B200 or the F200s at M-Wave. You've heard a lot of Martin Logan stuff before. They sound good. But then the trade-off there is you're spending double, even triple the amount per speaker as you are for those pro audios, because I think the B100s are about $800 a piece. And what are you gaining? Right? You're gaining some 2-channel, but if you're not putting the speaker directly next to a counterpart and comparing them, I don't know that it necessarily matters in that context. I'd say that, yes, you're leaving something on the table, but at that price point, you got to find the compromise that you're willing to live with, I think. Because one of those compromises is money, and we are compromising on money by spending less. So you give up performance in some of those things because you're spending less. It's that triangle, right? You can only have two. You can't have all three. So I would agree. Pro audio, I think, is where I would start if I was recommending to somebody. Is there something else that I would be happy with at that price point? No. My first Do Everything speaker starts at about $1,400, which does very well with music, can hit reference, and that's way more expensive than most people are going to want to spend on individual speakers.
Austin says personality can have something to do with the path they take.
Can you expand on what you mean by personality? You mean personality of the speaker or individual's personality? I still don't know what that means.
So perhaps someone, and I'm just reading between the lines because I'm not 100% sure either, but perhaps somebody who is like youthful and fun and interactive and wants something loud and kind of like party type speakers, and somebody who's more reserved, engineer style, calm, peaceful, maybe they would prefer something, a different type of speaker, that type of thing.
So maybe because the pro audio, right, you're giving up some of the fidelity for the ability to get loud and not distort. So is what you're saying, just to make sure we're on the same page, that maybe somebody, instead of getting the SPL, wants more of that quote unquote refinement out of a speaker, but they're sacrificing the ability to get louder in the SPL range?
There's certainly people who don't care about reference and would prefer to have like a little cleaner sound or a little bit more refined sound in their speaker, and are fine with that. That's okay.
So if I were to do that, let's tackle that question. So let's say you were compromising on the ability to hit reference, and you were going more for fidelity, maybe a flatter frequency response, or something that you thought sounded more, that did better with music, I guess is what I'll say, brought some of that emotion back in for 2-channel. What would you do?
Well, I don't necessarily agree with the premise, but going along with it.
Well, okay.
Because I think, you buy a pro audio speaker, you have the room to manually EQ to make a flat frequency response in your room. You could talk about refinement a little bit, because a compression driver on a PA speaker that's inexpensive, like a $300, $200 PA speaker, is not going to be the best compression driver. They're just not. Now, that being said, I really think you're probably going to have to spend like $700 or $800 to match it in a home theater type speaker. for a $200 to $300 speaker
Mm-hmm.
on the pro audio side, that's like the alignment, right? Because they save so much on the cabinets, they get the mass quantity on these drivers. These drivers are made for big venues, a lot of space. Like that's their design. Whereas a home theater speaker, they'll use like a 6.5 or maybe even a 5 1/4 inch driver. They'll make a nice wood veneer cabinet. They're spending more on the cabinet. They're trying to make probably a more perfectly flat frequency response, maybe with a crossover, maybe. Although Pro Audio is not going to just like joke around, they're going to make a nice flat response as best they can for the price point too. If we're discounting reference, which I would never do personally, that's one of my strongest requirements. I think like a Wharfdale Diamond bookshelf, it's mass manufactured. They're fairly inexpensive. They've been making them for years and they have a nice sound. They're not going to hit reference, but they're going to be a nice sound and they're probably not very expensive. Like we're talking, especially if you're willing to do used, you can get those for probably a couple $100 a bookshelf or something and they sound good.
Well,
they
let's
sound
talk
good.
new. What are they new?
I haven't tracked them for a long time. My friend had a few. I've had different Wharfdales over the years. Let me look them up real quick.
I mean, Wharfdale's not a bad brand.
And the Diamond is one of their top brands, right? So it's not their entry level stuff. They're mass manufactured, so they're inexpensive. It looks like they're like $450 at Crutchfield.
Okay.
For a bookshelf now, not for a tower.
Yeah, tower's going to be rough at that price point. I think you're sacrificing a lot at that point. Where would I be? Yeah, probably around that price point. Wharfdale would be solid. I'm going to take it up a little bit further to something like an Ascendo the 5, which is $860 MSRP. If I were going that direction. So what didn't you agree with me on my statement?
Just that you couldn't get refined in a pro audio speaker or that they're not good with music. It's kind of, and maybe it's reading between the lines a little bit. And I don't say that I wouldn't claim that there'd be like a 2 channels go-to choice, but I don't think you can say that a pro audio speaker is not good with music. That's what they're actually designed for. I mean, that's what they're at the Guitar Center Musician Instruments for, is for live music reproduction. Like that's their purpose. So
yeah,
just like anything else,
but I think
tiers.
a live music reproduction in like at a concert is a little bit different than what you're chasing potentially in a living room.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but it could be that I've just never been a huge fan of compression drivers and what they do, how they present. So it's not me saying they're bad speakers. I think you're right. It's probably just me being more subjective about the type of speaker that I like. I should say that it's not that they're bad at music. It's that I don't like the way that they present.
Yeah, you subjectively prefer something else. That's totally fine. Yeah, it's very valid.
Yeah. So I think $500, under $1,000, or ramping up there a little bit for a lot of people. But if you can find something on the used market, it's like buying a used car. Let somebody else take the first hit. You can get a lot for not a lot. Now, what about subs?
So I have a little bit higher threshold on the subs, I think, where I'm going to tell you, if you're going to buy new, something like the HSU VTF 15, something like the Rhythmic 15, FV15H, those types of subs are where I'm going to say is your minimum entry point, where you won't be dissatisfied and won't be looking for something new the first time you go over to someone's house that has a nice system. And those are probably, you're talking $1,200 to $1,700. So you can find subs all day at Best Buy or Nebraska Furniture Mart that are $500. They're going to only play down to 30 hertz. Typically, they're not going to be very loud. They're going to sound like a fart box when you turn them up. Like you're going to have an explosion and you're going to hear bad noises instead of the explosion sound. You won't be happy with that. Like ignorance is bliss is echoing in the comments. That's true. You're going to be probably okay with it until you hear a better system. And then you're like, my sub doesn't do anything like that.
Well,
and I think
another way that I've heard that said is ignorance is cheap. You don't realize how much you need to spend until you realize how much you need to spend.
No doubt.
Chase the rabbit down the hole.
I think you got to get into like that. I think you got to get into that 1,500. Let's just say 1,500 as a ballpark, into that range with a retail sub. Now, if you do it yourself, you can do it cheaper. But with like a retail off the shelf, internet direct, whatever, you got to get in that range before you get a sub that's not doing bad things when you're trying to watch movie soundtracks, that's playing the full frequency response you want, let's say down to at least 20 hertz, but I'm going to advocate for like 16 hertz. Something in that realm is more where I would rather have my subs ported if you're getting a ported sub. Or something that's sealed that has enough excursion, it's a good enough driver that it's not going to just bottom out every time you hit a low note.
When you're dealing with ported subs, I mean, what ported subs have a box that's really big enough at that price point?
A lot of them are more like 18 hertz and so forth, but it's...
To get down that low, there's not very many.
Yep.
I mean, how far down does the Klipsch 1600 get?
You have to look it up. And a real test, probably, right?
Well, what is Audioholics measured? What
exactly.
Because I think they've measured it. Because that's not a bad...
Its MSRP is 1,800 now, to be fair. And it's on crazy deals with Adorama from time to time.
I'm saying... I brought that sub up because it's always on crazy deals. So much so that it sucks carrying them as a dealer because I have to tell people, because I don't know, truthful, that don't buy from me. Go buy it online because you're going to get a better deal.
I mean, even there, it's rolling off pretty good, about 20 hertz. Like, it's steady. I'm looking at the Audioholics CEA test. Mm-hmm. It's steady in the 117 range. And then it starts at 25, it's 113. At 20, it's 109. At 16, it's 16 hertz, it's 105. And at 12, it's 98. So it's fallen off pretty hard, starting at about 25, 20.
Depending on how what ported sub are you getting for $1,500 that's going to be able to extend that? I don't think there really are any.
No. So look up, I just know, like, from database testing, the Rhythmic FV15H, it's probably $1,800 sub. Like, that's internet direct, so you get a little better value typically than the retail stores. You're buying directly from Rhythmic instead of Best Buy getting their cut, that type of thing. That's a fantastic sub. In my mind, with all the subs I've heard, many dozens of subs, that in multiple shootouts, that's the first sub that I thought, like, this is the beginning of the S tier, like the tier where you can be satisfied. It doesn't make any bad drive, any noises. It's servo controlled, so it reins in any kind of. People say servo is great for different reasons. Some people say it has less distortion, all that kind of stuff. I'm not so worried about that so much as it has a good reining in of the subwoofer to keep it from getting out of control, like to keep the excursion in control, where it won't make bad sounds. So that to me is kind of like, in my mind, that would be the first level where you're like, you don't need to replace that. You can just buy more of that if you need more firepower. Versus everything kind of below that, it's more like, all right, you want to upgrade? Maybe you should go to this tier and start your journey there. Versus just add more because you're already at the top tier as far as sound and performance and quality and all that stuff.
I'm looking at that. Rhythmic. Where is... Okay. I mean, the Klipsch has it beat.
Are you on database or Audioholics? Look at them.
Database. I'm looking at the database. The Klipsch obviously isn't on here, but from what he has is a maximum at 20 hertz is 102.
But keep in mind that database does it at 2 meters, and Audioholics I don't think is doing it at 2 meters. I think they're doing 1 meter. So you need to add 6 dB to database's numbers if you're comparing to Audioholics, I think.
So hold on, I gotta orient
myself. Let's see if I'm making that up.
So 20 is 108, so 114.
No, here it is. It says on Audioholics, I'm looking at, our measurements have been referenced to 2 meters, which is 9 dB down from the standard requirement for the measure to be shown at 1 meter.
So they're the same.
However, most publicly available CW measures are shown at 2 meter RMS, so we fall like a vision. So yeah, okay, so they are doing 2 meters at all Audioholics. So there's your apples.
So 108 at 20.
So the Klipsch was 109 at 20. Now different people reviewing them, but that's same ballpark. What about 16?
102.
All right, and the Klipsch is 105 at 16.
But the Klipsch also has a significantly larger box. The Klipsch is enormous.
Mm-hmm.
And just looking at the pictures from the Rhythmic, it doesn't look as big. So I think that's a testament to box size, right, is going to, if you have a smaller cabinet, it's going to limit the amount of output, especially on a ported sub, which is a big reason that things like the JTR 4000s are as big as they are. Or even
Refrigerator
the
sized.
2800s. I mean, you got to have a big cabinet in order to and you could probably make them bigger, in all honesty, and get more output. So this is probably just a limit of cabinet size.
Well, and the Eclipse is a slightly bigger driver. It's 16 versus a 15, and the rhythmic and so forth. So it's.
But what's the frequency response like on that? Can you pull up the?
You want the Eclipse or the database shared?
Klipsch. Let's look at that Klipsch.
Okay, I'll share a screen here. Tell me if you can see it and if it's not blown out from. So I mean, look at this. We've talked about this many times before. They've done some compression sweeps here. See how it's nice and flat, nice and flat, nice and flat, up to about 100 dB. Reasonably parallel. You get up to this 110 dB range, 108 dB range, and it's starting to roll off at the bottom. And you get up to this 110, 115 dB range, and it's like a mountain peak. And you're losing everything down low, below about 30 hertz. And that's just the way subs behave. As you get to their limits, the nice EQ'd response that they give you out of the box goes away, and it returns to more of like a natural response of what they are in the box with no EQ. So keep that in mind, everybody, as you're looking through this. It's good to see these compression sweeps because you see how your sub performs at high levels. You remember, now this is outside at 2 meters, so you're not going to have any room gain, boundary gain, that kind of thing. But THX reference calls for 115 dB, and so you're not going to probably have the output to really have a full range sub with this Clips, unless you have multiples, right?
Well, and that's un-EQ'd too. If you start throwing EQ on top of that, it's going to get worse.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to potentially run out of headroom quicker, depending on what you're doing, because you're using up some of the amps power with the EQ functions. But realistically, you're going to need more than one of these in a home theater room, unless you have a lot of room gain.
You're saying that you can almost get to reference, but this was taken at 2 meters. So if your sub is further, say your sub is 4 meters away, I mean, you're losing another 6 dB on top of that.
Yeah, but room gain's a real deal and can add stuff, especially in these low frequencies. So
I guess what I'm saying is you got to remember that the frequency response is not necessarily the type of output that you're going to get in your room. So let's see that frequency response. Is it on there?
That's the only graph we get, it looks like, on the Autoholics route. Oh, here we go. Here it is. So,
is there any smoothing?
I mean, this is not pushing it. This is just like a arbitrary volume setting, if you will. It's at 92 dB. So they're kind of showing like, here's what the Clips does when it's not straining outdoors, like that. What Clips engineers have done to EQ the subwoofer in its normal operating range where it's not struggling. And it's pretty flat between, like, let's say about 16 hertz and 150 hertz. Like that's a nice, good response.
That's pretty good.
It won't keep it, which is what we've evidenced down here. But when you're not driving it hard, it will. And so you need some siblings with this, right? You need more than one, is what that tells you. I haven't heard this thing cranked on. I've heard it at M-Wave, but we weren't. When I was in there, nobody was ever pushing these things to the limits to see what they could do.
Yeah.
So what I will tell you very clearly, I'll stop my share here, is that I know for certain, without a shadow of a doubt, that rhythmic, the servo amp on there and the way it's engineered will not let that rhythmic make a bad sound. Like it just won't do it. So that's why I say like that's a nice tier, because you're not gonna have a fart when an explosion happens. It's gonna sound good. It's gonna continue to sound good. You might not have any headroom. It might not make any more volume. You might lose your dynamics, but it's not gonna make bad sounds and take you out of the scene. You know, like, oh, that shouldn't be there.
Well, let me send you the rhythmic.
I got to figure out. We're in a different software than we normally are, and I don't know how to stop sharing as far as that goes. But I guess if you share, I'll just pull it back up again.
I just put it in private chat.
Okay, got it. Pulling it up. Well, there's no obvious stop sharing here, and I think it's going to continue.
You got to hit the monitor button.
monitor button. Okay. There we go. Stop screen sharing. Thank you.
Here we
okay.
go.
Now I have to start sharing with the other one. Okay. So here's the rhythmic.
Mm-hmm. Is it going to load? There it goes.
All right. And this is different orientations. I don't care about that so much. Let's see if we can get to the frequency response. Okay, so here's your output compression sweeps. And you can kind of see at that same place. Like these rise in unity pretty well. We're starting to get a little compression on that blue line at about 110 dB. That red line's really hitting some compression. It's no longer rising like it should. And it's at 115 dB. But it's still actually going a little deeper than the clips is at that level, I think. I mean, different measurements, different mics, different people doing this. You don't know exactly, but they're in the same ballpark, really.
Yeah.
And again, it's reining it in. It's saying like, you're going to make port noise or you're going to make driver excursion issues. We're going to rein you in on that amplifier. It will not make bad noises at those sweep levels with that product. Now the clips, I would be really surprised if the clips doesn't make bad noises at its max.
Well, most subs will.
Yes. And that is a leg up. That's why I'm saying it's a leg up.
Yeah. Let's not dog on it because that's just something with that any speaker or any subwoofer is going to happen. This one, since it's servo driven, is able to stop itself.
Mm-hmm.
Supposedly.
Well, that's been my experience. I mean, we were running at one of the East Coast meets for all it was worth, like trying to make bad noises. It never did. Mm-hmm. It just kept behaving because it just limits. Like it just limits itself. It knows the parameters of the driver, the excursion capability of the driver. They programmed that all into the amp DSP. It just says you can ask whatever you want. I'm not giving it to you. I know what my limits are, and I'm only going to my limits. Whereas most amps that aren't servo controlled, they're just kind of a dumb amplifier, if you will. They might have the DSP programmed in. They might say, hey, give me this much of a boost, a shelf boost. Give me this parametric EQ at these different frequencies, whatever. But it's not tailoring it or reining the driver back in any regard as that driver hits its limits. It doesn't know the limits. It's just applying dumb power, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Whereas the servo is communicating with the driver, realizing the distortion plots and the characteristics of the driver and reining it in on the fly as it needs to. It's a more expensive design. It's a little bit stronger design. All right.
I'm checking one more thing.
Now look at this. Scott says 97% of budget should be on subs. 97.
Scott, 97% of your wall in your theater is subwoofers.
That's funny.
Okay, let's be real. It's not just budget; it's the interior part of your theater. Good Lord, man! I'm trying to find something here. Let's see.
I'm gonna take a second to look at the comments because I haven't been keeping up with them. Have you been keeping up with them?
Starring them. Yep, or trying to. Where is that sub?
I'm looking at some comments related to the adventure, this camping this weekend. Michael says, just stay home, Jonathan. Just stay home.
Yeah. While I'm looking for this, somebody said that they use crown amps for their subs. And I was going to comment on that while that can be good, you can also be causing yourself a little bit of a problem with running into undefeatable DSP down low on those crowns.
Yep.
So just be careful when you're doing that and make sure that you're actually getting the frequency response that you think you should be getting.
Yeah, there's some threads, and if you look on AVS Forum, you'll find a thread on it. Crowns have any crown with a DSP built in. So if it's got the DSP functionality, they have a non-defeatable high-pass filter. It starts at about 20 hertz. So if you're trying to use it with sealed subs, you're losing a little bit of ground just by that being installed there.
Yep. Still looking.
Crowns are great amps. Don't get me wrong. Like they'll last 30 years. But what in the world happened to your head? It got huge.
Did it?
Yeah.
Is it so big?
Got stretched like Conehead style.
Oh, that's fun. Not exactly sure what.
Zoomed in or something.
Why did I get so big? What happened there? that? I
It's
can't tell if that's better or not.
It's still stretched. You're
Yeah,
elongated.
what's going on there? Let me try and change that and then come back to it. That's better. I don't know what happened. I guess a miscommunication on the inside.
Chad, how's our volume levels relative to each other? Are we okay tonight?
Mm-hmm.
No response. We'll have to wait for a response on that one.
Well, it's delayed slightly. Let's see. This is what I wanted. Measurement reports, subwoofers. It's not on there. Well, never mind.
So this gentleman on topic here, he says $15,000 will get you a nice multi-channel experience. That's absolutely true. I agree.
Yeah.
I think you can do it for cheaper than that, personally. But
Ryan is lower started out okay. It's probably because I don't talk directly into my mic. I have a tendency to look away and forget. And then my volume goes down. Jonathan has compression driver. Technically, the MadVR Experience Center has compression drivers too. I just finally found one that I liked.
Mm-hmm. Can be super clean.
$15,000. If you had $15,000, what would you do? What does that leave you for speaker? Well, let's just talk about a theater. What would you do?
Yeah, I think I could do it easily for $15,000. And if you think about it, like the SVS room the other year in M-Wave, maybe 2 years ago, they advertised that room was like $11,000 all in, and it was a nice room. I mean, it even had a projector and everything, like all in. 2 PB16 Ultras, even as far as subs, like that wouldn't necessarily be the direction that I would go, but I don't think that was a bad system at all for the money. It sounded great.
But what would you do?
Sure. I would probably buy a couple of those rhythmics I talked about. I would buy probably something along the lines of a series of Mackeys or Behringer Pro Audio speakers. Make all speakers match throughout the room, and you're looking at like $200 to $300 a speaker in that realm. So if you want 11 speakers, you're looking at $2,000 or $3,000. If you want 13 speakers, it's still $2,000 or $3,000. So you got 3.5 wrapped up in subs. Maybe you got 3,000 wrapped up in speakers. That's $6,500. I'd buy 3,800 from Denon, the AVR. That's $1,000. So now you're up to maybe $7,000, maybe
well, let's
$6,000.
Be clear, you're counting on the Adorama deal.
Okay, sure. If you want to add a little bit, we're still at like let's say $7,500 so far, right?
Okay.
And then for a projector, you could buy a used NP5 or an LS 12,000 used for $3,000, $3,500, or $5,000 new.
NP5 right now is on sale for $39.99.
Ah, that's a great projector for that price.
Yeah.
Is that B stock or that's new?
No, that's new.
That's a great price for that projector. So yeah, I mean, I'm far less than $15,000. You can buy a screen. I think personally, you could probably, for that type of system, for that level, get by with like a elite screen or a silver ticket screen or something off Amazon. It's not the best screen in the world, but it's going to be a good enough screen for the type of system we're talking about here. And those are, $500, $600, $700. Cables is really all you got left at that point. And you got it made. You're less than 10 grand. Well, you're at 10 grand or maybe 11 grand. And you got full reference capability because those speakers will do full reference. So you get the giggles when you're watching something at that level.
Yeah. I just personally have never gotten my jollies from PA speakers at that price range, or really the only PA speakers that I really like are those 70J1s that you have. Everything
nice recovery. Nice recovery.
Oh, shut it. But I'm serious. Like the 70J1s, I mean, that's it. I like them. I think they do really well. You and I were just talking about some used ones that somebody here in Kansas City is talking about selling. He wants way too much for them, but I think I thought about it. buying them because I, depending on the price, knew that somebody would want them. They're good speakers, and they're very, very versatile. They can do a lot. So what I would do personally, for $15,000, I mean, I got to stay with Martin Logan. I just like the way they sound. So Martin Logan, you could do the in-wall XTW5 LCRs and then do XTW6s. I'm just doing in-walls here. XTW6s for surrounds, and then you could do MC6 heights. So at that point, you're at MSRP-wise, you're like 6, somewhere in there. And then maybe some Ascendo, the 12 sub-actives, or you could do SVS, the PB16s, and then either a Denon X2800 or X3800, depending on if you could find the deal on Adorama. Projectors, I'm in the same boat as you. That $39.99 for the MP5 is really good.
Yes.
Or if you spend a little bit more and need a little bit more brightness, the LS12000. If you do a TV, I don't know maybe an LG QNED to get an 86.
How much is that? That's probably like
$3.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're getting name brand, you're gonna be paying a little more than like the TCL or whatever.
Well, yeah, I've never been a fan of what the TCLs look like, but I mean maybe they look similar to the LG QNEDs. I've never had them next to each other, so I don't know. If you did something like a 83-inch OLED G4, you're at $6,500. So let's just say that's the direction you went, and then you have your miscellaneous stuff. So you're right around at that point $15,000. So entirely doable. And then anything above that is just gravy. Increasing fidelity, increasing SPL, increasing clarity, screen size, what have you. So, but I think that's a good starting point. Where do you think is the sweet spot?
Like as far as speaker count, or as far as
which price point? Buying new. Let's not go down the used market because it's
like, where do you get the best value for your money is what you're asking? Or we kind of already touched that. Refine a little bit more.
Like where do you think the sweet spot is for you? Are you just going to regurgitate what you have currently?
I mean, if I knew of a better sweet spot, I wouldn't have what I have.
I guess that's true. That's kind of a loaded. That's kind of a dumb question. Where would my sweet spot be? Probably Ascendo the 10s is where my sweet spot would be. And you can do up front, and then you could do Ascendo the 6s with I haven't seen it yet, but like an Epson QL 1000, a Stewart Harmony G3, so woven, and then you could even throw in a Kaleidoscape Strato V in there, Denon X6800, 4 subs, and I think you're around 40 at that point, which in the grand scheme of things for an entire dedicated home theater for all of the gear, I don't think is too terrible. Maybe I'm wrong. Do you think 40 is too much?
I think that sounds like so unattainable to somebody brand new in the hobby.
I'm not saying brand new. That's not. Yeah. I'm saying the sweet spot, like where I think the sweet spot is for anything after that, and it's diminishing returns. Yes, that's more of what I meant. One of the best theaters I've ever heard had the 10s and the 6s. Now, granted, it had a 32-inch sub, which is not going to happen for $40,000. But speaker-wise, it was one of the best theaters I've ever heard, and it was $40,000 without that sub. So,
yeah, but that wouldn't even have like full surround suit, would it? For 40 grand? That'd be like was it like a 2.1 with 32s?
Well, I'm saying without, you wouldn't be able to do it with the 32s. Wouldn't happen. But for 40 grand, you're at, if I did the 10s and the 6s of what I was just talking about, it's 744. So with Kaleidoscape, with a Stewart 135-inch screen, with a Epson QL 1000. So it's not a insignificant theater. I mean, you could chop around in there, but you could still do very, very well for less than that. I think that's just what I'm saying is my sweet spot. I mean, how much does your theater cost, do you think, Jonathan?
It works its way up there. It really does.
It does.
Because, I mean, mine truly has been built over many years, but I got my speakers in 2017, used off eBay. My subs in 2014, bought new. Like it creeping up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even want to say aloud.
Mm-hmm. Like just in speakers, just how much are the 70J ones new?
They're like $1,100-$1,200 new, and I have 15 of them. Like just in speakers. I didn't buy them new. I bought them used. I paid $400 or $500 each on eBay. Used.
But even then,
it's sizable. It gets sizable.
And
the way I do it, and I think this is a way for people to kind of think of it, because, like I said, 40,000 seems insurmountable and dumb. Really, I mean, that's at its face, like
it does. But then you look at what's in the room, and you're like, oh,
yeah, But if you do it over 20, 25 years, like we've done, it's not as unpalatable. And like I work for corporate America. I get a bonus at the end of the year. A lot of times that bonus goes towards, hey, the next little tick in the room that I want to have, that's where that kind of bonus money directs towards. Like my fun money, kind of gets bumped at the end of the year with that bonus. And then I'll say like, all right, I'm buying 3 more subs for an airfield next year with my, with my bonus money or whatever, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's just like an accumulation over time.
I see a lot of guys saying dream, that's not going to happen. And what you just said was exactly what I was going to say is this typically doesn't happen overnight. You're not just going to go up to a dealer most times and write a check and be like, this is what I want to happen, unless you're saving money. Or you're not going to go onto Crutchfield or any of your Audio Advice or any of those places and just buy the theater outright. What I encourage people to do, and I think ends up being a better end result, and you end up not having to rebuy equipment, which is a pitfall that I could probably safely say that both you and I have fallen into.
Mm-hmm.
We've bought speakers, then upgraded, then upgraded, then upgraded, and we've had like full theaters that we've replaced these speakers with because we've been in this space for long enough that I would encourage people to do it piecemeal. Start with your LCR. Start with 2-channel. And then just slowly add on. And I think you're going to overall have a much better experience. And people are like, oh my gosh, 40,000, or I'm going to take it way up there. 100,000 is so much money. But when you space it out over 5 years and you're using, like you said, a bonus, or you do a side gig where you're, I don't know, flipping baseball cards or something to fund your other hobby, I think it's entirely attainable, especially if you do it little bits and pieces at a time. And I think we as people have a tendency to look at these huge numbers and be like, I'm never going to be able to do that. But you got to start somewhere. And I think it's a better approach to start small and do it right than it is to start small or do the whole thing, being impatient and getting something that's inferior, whereas you may just have 2 or 3 speakers to start with. I think that doing it in pieces is a much better approach, and it's a much better investment than it is just buying everything at once for most people.
I agree. And that's kind of, I mean, that echoes like that sub I was talking about. When you get to that type of sub, there isn't really better sub. There's just more output of that quality. So if you want more, then you just add more. Like, all right, I'm going to buy a rhythmic, and it doesn't have to be rhythmic. I'm just using that as an example, right? Because that's what we talked about earlier. I'm going to buy this rhythmic this year on this bonus, and next year I'll get a second one, and then next year if I still want more bass, I'll get a third one, on and on. That type of stuff is totally valid. It also kind of allows you to kind of like plot out your upgrades, you know? Like I didn't end up pursuing that, but that was one of the things I was thinking when I was trying to do a JTR system. I had a JTR 228 HT. I bought with my year bonus. I bought 3, left, center, right. And then I was just thinking like the next year I'll buy maybe 4 surrounds. And then the next year I'll buy like 4 ceilings. Like that was my game plan. That works. You know, you can piecemeal it together. And it's fine to do that. You know, in the meantime, it's not like you don't have to have surround speakers. You probably can get some speakers or have speakers that you can use. So you're just like, you're saying, I want this tier. I'll take a little bit of time to do it. And in the interim, I'll have a Frankenstein system. You know, I'll have my Sony speakers in the back or whatever, you know, like that's okay.
Well, what do we say typically when people buy subs? You get the biggest, baddest one you can afford now and then add another one later.
That's right.
It almost always ends up being a better experience because instead of spending less on 2 that are not going to be near the capability, because there is far less diminishing returns in subwoofers than there are in speakers, you're going to get a much better experience by plopping the big boy down and then adding another one later than getting 2 half-sized pipsqueaks just to have 2. Deal with the one, the inferior frequency response. Heck, it may be even the same, depending on the sub's quality, and then add another one. And it's going to be a much better experience down the line than spending that same amount and splitting it into something that's not as superior. Granted, it's more of an investment in the long run, so that is not to be unaccounted for. But I do think that people should look at this and be like, this is a hobby that isn't just going to go away next year, right? A lot of us have been doing this for a long time, and I think it's important to try and space things out. And big numbers are scary, but at the end of the day, if you spend a lot of time in that room, you only live once.
And I mean, really, I don't know how often you use your room, Ryan. I assume it's quite a bit. I'm in here multiple nights a week, staying up stupid late, where my wife's like, what is wrong with you? I mean, 3 times this week I was in here till 2 or 3 in the morning, and I have a normal corporate job, you know, so I'm like burning the midnight candle. But I'm enjoying myself too much to leave. Like I love being down here listening to music and exploring music, and like we watched multiple movies this week. Like I spend a lot of time in here. It's a good experience. Like it's worth it to me. I mean, rather than spending $40,000 on a car that I work from home, so in that case, not drive very often. Like, why wouldn't I rather have that in my room that I can spend multiple hours in and just really, really enjoy thoroughly? That's my head. That's where my space.
That's how I feel. I mean, I listen to music in mine while I'm working. I spend multiple hours. Granted, not right now because I've had to send amps off to Cedia. So it hasn't been functioning. But when it comes back, I mean, I'm in there all the time. It's my sanctuary, if you will. It's my safe space. So if you're spending that much time, think about how much money we spend on things that you don't spend nearly as much time on. And then it all starts to make a little bit more sense. I think, at least.
Gary mentions this is the way he'd go, and I don't think that's a bad choice at all. I've heard those CCB8 speakers at Expona at one point, and they sound really good. They're 8-inch coax, and they're inexpensive. And he has combo packs. And I already mentioned the HSU makes good subs, 1K on an AVR. His subs are about $1,200 a piece. That's a good path. That's a great way to get started. And like you said, he's talking right there, 5 HSU speakers. 5 isn't where you want to end up in most cases. You want to end up at probably like 7 or 11 or 13 or, you know, whatever. Get 5 this year, buy 5 next year.
Well, here's another path that this just reminded me of is, let's say you want to get started and you're worried about the financial commitment, but you really want in the long run to have an Atmos theater. Right? You could buy, let's say, 5 speakers for a 5-channel bass layer, not get the most grandiose thing, spend a little bit less, and then in a year or two, if you decide that you want to continue this, move those to your tops, right? And then reinvest in the bed layer now that you've established that this is a long-term commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that can always happen. If you plan right, you can reuse things that you've already invested in. And that's something that I did in my previous theater. Those 35 XTIs I used in other capacities, and then they got moved up to tops, and then I replaced the tops with center channels, and then those 35 XTIs became forward and rear tops. So they were constantly in use. They were just being retrofitted for different applications. And I think it's important to plan ahead to make sure that what you're doing is able to be reused instead of just thrown away. Get quality, not quantity.
Agreed.
Marvin says so far we have about 6,000 hours in our room. I'd imagine that that's probably pretty accurate. How many? I don't even want to know how many hours Jonathan has.
Too many.
Probably same. Uncountable. We don't have very many questions in here.
So Tim says you don't want to know what my sweet spot is. I'm not sure what that's in reference to. If it's about speakers, I do want to know. Yeah. What is it?
If it's not, I don't.
If it's some sort of Freudian statement, we'll leave it alone.
Yeah.
What do you think about the new... Oh, you flagged this one already. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pull it out early. But what do you think about the new dead-end receiver that just came out? It's kind of an odd... I thought that was a little odd that they did that.
What is it?
It's 13 channels of amplification. It's one step down below the A1H. And
What's the price point? 4 something?
High 4s, I think.
So it's like a tuned down A1H?
Like instead of 15 channels of amplification, it's got 13 channels of amplification.
Yeah.
But I mean, so the Denon 6800 exists, and that's 13 channels
processing.
But it's 11 channels of amplification, right? Yeah. So this is like kind of like between the 6800 and the A1H.
Yeah.
They just saw a hole and filled it, basically.
Yeah.
It has, I think, 150 watts per channel, so it's still got this same amount as the A1H. It's just got 2 channels less.
So it's got the big amps like the A1H does. Okay, I can get behind that.
Yeah.
For somebody that doesn't want to buy a external amp for their 6800 and just has it all in one piece. I wish Denon would do a processor. That would be nice.
They won't, though, unless they decide to give up Marantz, because Marantz is their line for processors.
Yeah. Tar Hoya says it's $4,500.
A1H is what, like 6,500 MSRP or something like that? I
think it's
7 MSRP.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big savings for 2 channels less processing. And you guys have heard us talking here before. I mean, right now, even though I have 6 ceiling speakers, I'm only running a 4-speaker configuration in the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
So, that makes a lot of sense in that context.
Yeah. Can the A1H do 17 channels of processing, or is it just 15 and 15?
15 and max at one time.
Oh, okay.
It can swap speakers in different connections. It has the AV10 and the A1H have more than 15 connections. Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to switch between Oro and Dolby Atmos or DTS-X, you can have them all in the arrangement, but they can't all be processed at once. Only 15 processed at once.
Okay. Yeah, what's the new one called?
It's almost really close to the A1H. It was on the front page of AVS Forum the other day. I don't remember. See if I can find it real quick. A10H.
That's a pretty good one, especially if you can. It does 15 channels of processing. If you add another amp, I mean, you can get an amp for your tops for a couple $100. So that's a pretty significant cost savings, like you just said. I think it's a good point. It's a good spot. I like it. I like it a lot. Anything else new aside from the Epsons that nobody's seen yet?
You'll see them this week.
Hopefully. I'm excited.
I hope they're not just out on the floor with all the brightness. I hope they have it in a room
that's they're in a dedicated room.
They're in a what?
They have a room.
Okay, good.
I'm a little worried about the naming convention, though. That QL is a little worrisome.
Do you know what it stands for yet?
Well, I'm just a little worried that it's not a UB and what that means for contrast.
Oh, they've already, on the documentation that's been out there from, I guess Taiwan already has it published or whatnot. At any rate, it does say that they're what's the right word? Polarized. The at least on the QB 1000B, it's polarized. So it's supposed to have as good or better contrast than the LS 12000 with 600 more lumens, which is 22% brighter.
Okay.
Now, when you go to the higher ones, the 3000 and 7000, I think it is, for the 6000 and 10,000 lumens, they actually lose some features. It's not a direct processor sweep. Like the 1000 processes HDR10 plus, and the 3000 and 10,000 or 3000 7000 do not, oddly enough.
The 1000 is the QB, and the 3 and the 7 or the 6000 or however they're naming it are QL.
Yeah, so they're probably not using. I think I knew this at one point. And I'm not going to speak though because I might have it wrong. But I know the contrast ratio is not supposed to be as good. Like the 10,000 lumen one is a 3001 contrast ratio instead of a 5001 contrast ratio, and I don't think the 3000 has been published yet, or I've missed it if it has been. Maybe it's in the middle. Maybe it's 4000 to 1. If it's 5, 4, and 3, would be a.
They do have selectable lenses though.
Yes, and existing lenses, so you can buy them used and cheap. There's like 10 or 15 different lenses that work on them.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool.
It is, but I kind of wonder if it's just a retrofit of a projector that already exists that they're putting into the residential line, which is a little
which is strange in one context though, Ryan, because why would they have a different processor on the 3000 and 7000 compared to the 1000? Like, why did they remove HDR10 plus?
Well, it would make sense if it's a commercial projector.
Oh, you're saying it's not even? Yeah, okay.
It's a lot like what Christie and Barco do, right? They take their commercial line, and they go, and they put it into the residential. They rename it. It may have some slightly different stuff, but it's not, for the most part, anything new. Some of the lines are, but for the most part, they're not. So I am a little worried that that's what's happened here. Now, in some context, for that price point, it's not necessarily the worst, because for that amount of lumens, depending on its capability, if it is better than the commercial counter, I don't know. It could be a win, but we'll have to see. I'm a little nervous.
Will you get to spend any time in that kind of thing? Or are you going to be glued to your room?
We are going to spend some time with Epson.
That's cool.
I have a meeting with them. And then there's rumors that something is coming from Sony. Now, I don't know.
Something bright too, right? Isn't that the rumor?
Don't know. Maybe. We'll see. There were rumors a while ago about an addition to the Raptor, which is the 380. Maybe that's what, I don't know. I don't know what it is. Some people said that they heard Sony wasn't doing anything, and some people said it was a display, and like a self-emitting display and not a projector, but I don't know. But there's rumors that there's more projectors.
And are the rumors that they'll release this at CEDIA, or are they not ready to release it?
No, supposedly it's CEDIA. And somebody was asking, is there anything from JVC? And the answer to that would be, as far as I understand it, no.
Why not? Why have they not released their RS2100 replacement, their NZ7 replacement?
I mean, maybe there is one. I don't know. There was a price cut on the NP5.
That's got to mean it's coming.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Don't have a good answer for that. I'm trying to think if there was anything else new that's supposed to be announced. The 28-inch square subwoofer coming from Ascendo. That's coming. They're doing a room with Storm with, I think, 12 of them. 6 up front, 6 in the back. That's cool. It's got the same surface area as a 32. Except it's a square. Which has some limitations, but the box is only 12 inches deep.
They partner with Kicker? That's the only person that does square subs I'm aware of.
So it's he designed it this way to limit the amount of space that it's going to need, but to create a sub that works well for things like waveforming, where you need a bunch of subs in the front and the rear. I don't have a price point or anything like that on them yet, but I'm excited to see that. Trying to think if there's anything else new. The MadVR Core.
Yeah.
The Kaleidoscape Strato V.
Yeah, those are both cool products. Nice price points.
Is there anything else new that I'm missing that I know of? There's tons of stuff that'll be announced there, but I don't think of anything else new right now. We got Martin Logan's new subs.
I love this comment.
I have a $20 Amazon screen and a $200 projector. I love that too.
He says they're not good, but I love them. That's okay, man. That's what we're talking about.
There are... I don't know where I was going to go with that. I mean, we dog on the things like the Optima all the time, but I still enjoy it. We use that thing outside all the time.
Do you have that thing fixed up permanently out there, or is it just to bring it out there?
It's in a drawer. We can't use it anymore because the wind ripped the screen off the wall.
Well, can't you just put it on the wall itself instead of the screen?
Wall's blue.
You got calibration toolkit. Come on now.
I don't have the brightness to overcome that on that Optima, even though it really wants to shooting light out every which way, even before the lens, but it's not going to overcome that.
I'm surprised you still had that. I thought you were kind of like trying to give it away with anyone that buy anything. Like, here you go. Here's a free Optima at one point.
I probably should. It's in a drawer. I haven't used that thing in forever. It was good for what it did. It was just...
That's a great option for outdoor projector.
Yeah.
Just like
it's a great projector for them. What's it, like $1,000 or something? I mean, it's not bad for the price point when you start considering other things. I mean, we're comparing it to like the likes of Epson, and that's really not fair because it's not
totally different price brackets. Yeah.
Totally different. So what can you do about that?
Austin says, tech moves very fast in electronics, AVRs, that kind of stuff we're talking about. Less so in subwoofer drivers, transducers. I still have my subs from 2011 and will rock them until the wheels fall off. Yes.
Same for speakers. You get a solid pair of speakers,
it'll last a long time.
It'll last forever. Forever. So let me bring up some of these questions still, because we don't have very many. But Marvin says, the LS12000 was the budget projector king in 2023 to 24. Epson has just announced its successor, QB1000. Any idea when you might review in the future? It is not the successor. The LS12000 is still going to be available. The QB1000 is a tier above it. It is $6,000 MSRP. If seven?
Eight.
It's eight.
Yeah.
It is $8,000.
Stab in the heart.
And it is just the next tier above the LS12000. The LS12000 is not going anywhere. They've just increased the lumen output and some capabilities, and that's where they're going. It's
supposed to have real-time tone mapping.
It's supposed to,
like JVC's style, where it's doing it on the fly.
This could be a really, really cool projector. I'm really excited about it. I don't know about the QLs, but this one I'm really, really excited about. I will see it next week. So hopefully when I come back, maybe we should plan on doing a Monday stream after I get back from CEDIA so we can talk about everything that was there.
Sure.
Why don't we plan on that?
Will you have any chance of bringing one back with you? Do you have an Epson contact in that regard?
I can't do that. No, I can try and get one.
It'd be awesome to review it. We could make a little video together comparing the 12,000 to that.
I will ask.
I think you could probably base some of your reaction to how good that's going to be based on how willing they are to let us compare them. Because they're like, nah, we don't need that. Then it's probably going to be pretty similar. And if they're like, yeah, sure, here, then maybe there's a big enough difference for them to want to show it.
I'll see. I'll try and float that one. We'll see. I'll try that.
Yes.
CJ asks, I want to build a living room system. I like music, and I'm looking for speakers that can play loud. What are your recommendations? JTR is off the table. I think Jonathan hammered this one with the PA speakers from Mackie and things like that for $200 or $300. I think he's going to pull them up.
I'm gonna give him some options. So look up, and they're not as cheap as they used to be, and I hate that because they used to be like significantly cheaper. COVID prices stuck them and kept them up there. But like look up if you want a powered speaker, look up something like a Mackie SRM 350. And if you want the passive version, it's called a Mackie C200. And I had 13 of those in my room, and I got a lot of compliments. They're a fantastic speaker, and they were only $200 when I bought them. And I think the retail on them now is more like retail on them is more like $300 now at this point.
That's perfectly fine.
But they sound really good. There's a link on AVS forum about like an overview of them, a teardown where I took it apart and let the do-it-yourself guys look it over, and they all said there's no way you could build this yourself for that price and the quantity of scale that Mackie has. It's built by EAW, which is a really strong group in the pro audio industry that's well known, makes good speakers. They built it for Mackie, so like good speaker. And another one that's real popular on the forums in the inexpensive space is like a Behringer 212XL. Those have many thousands of people that have reviewed them. I've heard a couple different systems with those as the entire speaker, like every speaker is those. A lot of fun, very inexpensive as well. Those are looking like 180 a piece. I personally like the Mackie a little better than the Behringer 212XL, but maybe the price difference doesn't add up. $120 difference per speaker is probably going to say like you can go ahead and do the Behringers at that point. So
especially
just a couple lines to
13
consider.
Of them.
Yep.
Super chat, Ryan Fleming. Thank you for the 10 USD. He says subs and Dirac bass control. Is excessive boundary reinforcement a good thing? I think that's is a question. Because the correction will compensate and end up having the sub work less hard because of the excess bass is being lowered. Is excessive boundary reinforcement?
I think he's saying is extra boundary gain a good thing? Sure. Your correction can get rid of it, and it means your amps don't have to work as hard to boost the lower frequencies. Sure.
If it's controlled, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes it can get out of control and it can cause problems, but if you can control it, sure.
Now, your thoughts on Dirac bass correction are kind of mixed, right, Ryan?
But that goes into room EQ in general, not necessarily just Dirac. I've seen issues where Dirac and room EQ, this is not just Dirac, but room EQ in general will try and treat bass.
Be careful with room EQ because that's a particular brand. Auto EQ processes, auto EQ routine.
Auto EQ.
Yes.
As you get down to like 20 or 25 hertz, it will just fall off a cliff. So we, as an example, did this in the Mad VR Experience Center. We had Dirac treating all the way down, and I was thinking the first time we did the calibration, like, this sounds a little anemic. Like, getting down low, we're missing all of the low end. My pant legs weren't really moving. There wasn't a lot of energy in the low end stuff. And we took a measurement of it, and at 25 hertz is when it started. By 15 hertz or so, we were 23 dB down. Now, for reference to that, we then did not a compression test. We just took a measurement. I don't know where the compression actually exists, like where things start to compress. At 110 dB, our F3 was just above 4.
Mm-hmm.
So that measurement of it falling off at 25 was auto EQ.
Whack.
That was not correct. And we were flat down to 4. It wasn't like it was having an issue. It was flat. So auto EQ was to blame there. And this happens in virtually every room that I deal with. And that's why in most cases, it is advantageous to manually EQ your subs and just apply a curtain to Dirac. Don't let it touch the subs. Typically, what we do is we will curtain it right around the crossover point and then just leave the subs alone. So
the trick with this, though, now in the context of Ryan's question, is if you're curtaining it off and not letting it touch the subs, your auto EQ, then that boundary gain might be excessive. It might stay excessive.
Yes, I'm simply saying that auto EQ can cause problems. So just be aware that you need to look at it after you allow auto EQ to do things in your theater. Turn auto EQ off, and then go look at what your subs can actually do. Really, you should EQ the subs before you even let auto EQ do it. You should do that with the speakers too, because just like video calibration, less is more. The less calibration software has to do, the better the overall outcome is typically going to be.
Yeah, I agree. I think in this case, Ryan, make sure you're using REW or OmniMic or some sort of software to see what you got going on.
Yep.
A lot of retail type subs, especially when you get into the upper end, will have like boundary gain knobs that you can basically change how much of an HPF the subs DSP applies. So you can add extra low end or remove extra low end depending on what your room needs at the subwoofer plate amp itself.
Okay, a couple more questions. Dubno Bass. How much do you guys think Direct Live Odyssey can help cheaper speakers sound better in your room?
Only to a point. And for that point, you need headroom. So if you got cheap speakers and they're like 82 dB sensitive and they're junk Radio Shack drivers, you can't do a whole lot with it because EQ eats up a lot of power. The application of EQ, and the speaker is just going to distort or go bad. If the excursion's crap, if it's just a junk driver, it's not a whole lot you can do. If you have a very high headroom speaker, and this goes back to that pro audio discussion we were talking about earlier, very high SPL speaker that's capable of high headroom, a lot of SPL, you have more room to EQ with that because you're not going to hit the limits of the speaker as you apply that EQ.
The danger to that, though, is seat-to-seat consistency.
Absolutely.
So it's auto EQ is not a replacement for quality speakers.
I agree.
If you try and fix issues with auto EQ and you just like, I'll buy a cheap speaker and be like, I'm going to fix it in auto EQ, it's a recipe for a underwhelming experience. And you may not know it's underwhelming until, like me, go to Jonathan's and be like, mine doesn't do this. So don't skimp. Right? Don't fall into the pitfall of, well, I'll just fix it in auto EQ. That's don't do that. Next question. One more after this one.
Oh, you already answered that one, I think. That was the Denon.
Yes, we did. Last one. Marvin, is 3300 lumens from the Epson the same ANSI lumens from JVC?
Not exactly, but close, right? You can answer this one. You're close to it.
I don't know what the measurements are.
So what the way I'm taking this question, and maybe Ryan's thinking a different way. When they say these ANSI lumens, it's kind of at their dynamic mode, like their brightest picture mode, and that's probably not the way that most people are going to use their projectors. A lot of times it leans green. So a calibrated Epson compared to a calibrated JVC from their marketed lumens, the JVC is usually kind of closer to the marketed number because they have less calibration to do and they're not quite as wild a dynamic mode. But like the Epson, like traditionally Epson will make, if it says it does 3300 lumens, they do 3300 lumens. It just may not be in the most accurate, color accurate picture mode.
Yes.
So yeah, it's going to be bright. And if the way you're leaning the question, I think Ryan might have been thinking like, how bright is the JVC to get? Is the NZ900? It's around 3,300 lumens too. It's not much different, right? As far as its manufacturer rating.
The difference is typically on the JVCs, like you said, you have to take away less. So after calibration, the fall off isn't nearly as drastic. The Epson, it pushes green or potentially more blue. JVCs are typically warmer, and they fall off less after calibration, typically.
So I've been reading on the forums quite a lot about these new Epsons. And it's a lot of speculation, but it's from very knowledgeable people. And the people have been saying, like, some of the guys that have had a lot of experience calibrating the Epson LS12000 are saying, like, hey, if it says 3,300 lumens in dynamic mode, you can expect 2,500 lumens, 2,700 lumens in that ballpark with a nice calibrated image, like a good quality calibrated image. That's fair. Because the Epson, and the reason they say that is the Epson LS12000 is marketed as 2,700 lumens, and it calibrates down to about 2,100 lumens. So it's losing about 600 lumens in the calibration process to go from its dynamic mode to a nice color accurate mode.
I would agree with that. I think that's accurate. I got one more question. Oops, sorry, asks, what do you guys think about Magic Beans guys saying you can DSP a cheapo speaker to outperform $1,000 speakers? No.
We just talked about that.
It's not going to happen. This is, a lot of people would like you to believe this, but if you then put $1,000 speaker in that room, it's going to sound way better. It's not going to behave that way. Like we talked about previously, less is more, especially in seat-to-seat consistency. You may be able to get away with a little bit with doing one seat, but if you move from that specific spot, if you have a speaker with enough headroom, it's going to fall apart.
If you're doing very narrow or high Q adjustments, like narrow bandwidth, high steep changes, it will fall apart. If you're doing broad changes, low levels, it won't fall apart when you go seat to seat.
Yeah, but typically the cheapo speakers, you're running into like peaks and valleys that you're having to fix, and you're not going to be able to put broad Q factors in there to fix things. You're going to need the more narrow stuff to fix issues with the speaker.
I hear you.
I mean,
there's some little caveats here, because the Magic Beans guy is going to be not necessarily like, you're getting to tailor some of that a little bit. It's not just like an auto EQ process 100%, just doing its own thing and making huge spiky, peaky things. You get to control it, but I don't. The premise, I agree with you that that's not a good premise. Like it'd be nice.
It would be nice. But you're going to get a better experience with those more expensive speakers, as long as they're good speakers. There's a lot of $1,000 speakers that are not good. So maybe it's the basis of the comparison is flawed. I don't know, but I would disagree with that. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Well, I will schedule a stream for next Monday, not this Monday, and we'll talk about Cedia, and hopefully I'll have some info on those Epsons.
Yeah. Good questions tonight, guys. Thanks.
If we're lucky, I'll have one on the way back to us.
Yes.
That'd be nice.
That'd be nice.
No promises. No promise. They're probably going to be like, oh, we don't have any, but maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. But good questions tonight.
Yeah.
Good conversation. 8:20, so not too late. That's all I got.
Very good.
Same for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, guys, we will stream. We're not streaming tomorrow. We're going to be off for a week. Then we're going to do Monday after Cedia. So Cedia closes Saturday. I have to tear down the room on Sunday, and then I fly back Sunday night, and we will stream Monday night to talk about, hopefully, new stuff that's at Cedia.
Yeah. In passing, sometime, maybe we could talk about, I've been playing with some karaoke stuff with Apple TV. You can see the soundboard. It's a Mackie soundboard on the middle of the floor over there. I'm buying some Behringer mics that were on a great sale at Sweetwater to add to the collection, but having some fun with karaoke. So maybe we could talk about that some night.
I am not a karaoke guy.
I really was enjoying listening to my kids singing. They were singing like songs, and it was making me smile just listening to them sing.
I mean, I would listen to my kids, but I am not a karaoke guy.
It kind of humbles you, because like when you're trying to sing along with these artists and so forth, and I was trying to do it. I can sing. I was trained in singing, but I'm not as good as these modern artists. And you can hear yourself and know you're not as good as those modern artists. And it's kind of, it's
a lot of artists, I won't say that. Yeah. I'll go there. Okay. Well, let's wrap it up here. I got to get up at 3:30 to head to the airport.
Enjoy, man. All right. Thanks, guys.